Hello, and welcome to the Professional Empathy Podcast. My name is Leanne Butterworth, and on this episode, we are exploring empathy and neurodiversity at work with Emma Shaw from Australian Spatial Analytics, or ASA for short. Emma is passionate about creating and delivering data-driven solutions that have a positive social impact. She is currently working as an account manager at ASA, which is Australia's largest and fastest growing work-integrated social enterprise that provides career pathways for neurodiverse young adults in the geospatial and engineering professions. Emma is committed to fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, and especially in promoting the value of neuro-inclusive practices in industry. The goal of today's episode is to reduce some of the taboos, stigma, and misperceptions about neurodiversity at work and help people become more inclusive and create spaces of real belonging. I've become aware of the amazing work ASA are doing in the social enterprise world, and I can't wait to share it with you. My name is Leanne Butterworth, and this is the Professional Empathy Podcast. Welcome, Emma, and thank you for being here on the Professional Empathy Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Leanne. I really appreciate it.
So I'm so excited to talk to you today because this is a topic I think that we're hearing a lot more about. This word neurodiversity, this word neurotypical, neurodivergence, there's all these words. Could you please tell me a little bit about yourself? And let's start with a little bit of definitions, maybe.
My name is Emma Shaw. I use she, her pronouns. And I guess I'm speaking to you today about neurodiversity because I work at Australian Spatial Analytics, ASA, which is a social enterprise, so not-for-profit, that focuses on getting young neurodivergent people into geospatial and engineering careers. So in terms of definitions, so neurodiversity is really a term that reflects that there are infinite variations in the ways that people's brains develop and how people interact and feel and process information. So it's similar to, say, biodiversity. So it's really reflecting the fact that across humanity, everybody's brains are different, and that's a wonderful thing. In terms of neurodivergence or neurodivergent or neurotypical, those are also broad terms, so not medical terms, but terms that allow for the fact that there are, broadly speaking, ways that brains might typically develop, and then ways that they might differ. And so you might say a neurotypical person doesn't have anything that is causing their neurocognitive function to differ from the majority of people in the population. Whereas a neurodivergent person might have either a developmental condition or something that's happened to them later on in life that's meant that their brain functions differently to the norm, which is not necessarily to say it's a negative thing or a positive thing. It's just that there's a difference. Some of the terms that I guess I've most frequently heard of when you think about neurodivergence, so you get autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, but those are sort of neurodevelopmental conditions, so things that you're born with. But there are also things, say if you have an acquired brain injury or a concussion, that's inherently also going to impact the way that your brain operates and might make your brain different from the norm. And I guess it's often really hard with language to really focus on differences without making them feel like a negative term, especially with language I guess if we think about the medical model and the way that things are named. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it's a deficiency and a disorder. It's saying, like, this is the problem, as opposed to the social model of disability that looks at the fact that you are not the problem. It's the way that the environment impacts you that's, causing that challenge or causing that difference. So say for ADHD, people often have differences in the way that they perceive time. So things are now or not now. If we think about the fact that for the vast majority of human development, watches didn't exist. So, the fact that you don't perceive time is not necessarily a problem until you have to be somewhere at a specific time.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. Yeah.
So neurodiversity is kind of the human experience that we are all different. And then underneath that, there is neurodivergence, which is people who potentially have either genetic or acquired differences in how their brain works. And then underneath that, you've potentially got different conditions, let's say. And some of those, so you've got your ASD, your ADHD.
There are so many things. It can be Tourette's, it can be post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
It can be, just really anything that impacts the way that someone's brain might be different to what's considered the norm. Yeah.
And my guess is a lot of the time when we're having these conversations, it's none of our business. It's not like we need to sort of go, well, which are you? As though we have any right to that information at all. So understanding that there are lots of different types of neurodivergence and not labeling them. And I guess that's where inclusive language comes in as well. Not labeling somebody as having a disorder or being this or they are that. It's a person with ASD, a person with ADHD, just a person. Instead of going, although, correct me if I'm wrong, there are lots of folks with autism who goes, no, I'm autistic, that's cool, I'm autistic, I own it.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it's about asking people, if someone says, I'm autistic, you should follow their lead and say, Emma's autistic, not Emma has autism, because often people, I'd say I'm an ADHDer, like that's part of who I am, rather than I have ADHD. Like language again makes this tricky sometimes, right? Because ADHD is awkward. But because it's part of who I am fundamentally.
Yeah.
It's not something that I can, it's just part of who I am. I can't fix it. It's challenging, but it's also wonderful. So it's best to ask people how they like to, talk about that. But as you say, it's because there are so many assumptions about, someone with autism, the things that they might find challenging or not find challenging, or someone with ADHD. It's also, do you need to ask? Or if we're thinking about neurodiversity in the workplace, do you want to make an inclusive organization that benefits everybody and doesn't force somebody to have to disclose that is, that's who they are? Because it's a privilege to be able to, I guess, have somebody share that information with you, because oftentimes it's, it has been challenging in their lives. They have, if we're thinking about workplaces, I think it's 34% of neurodivergent people are unemployed. And so if you're coming into an environment where you've had previous bad experiences with employment and you've faced stigma based on these things that you've disclosed, it can be challenging, and people will often wait until they feel that they can be seen and be seen to do the work before they disclose that. There was a recent study by Allianz, the insurer, that found that 40% of people, neurodivergent folk, weren't disclosing in the workplace because of those unconscious biases towards disclosure, and the fact that, you say, oh, I have ADHD, so they're going to think, oh, you're going to be disorganized, you could be late, you're going to struggle with these things. And that can be true, but let the person ask, let the person show you what they need. You can also just say, how do you like to work? How do you like to receive information? How do you like to communicate? Do you prefer text? Do you prefer meetings? Do you prefer video calls? How do you like to do things? How can I best work with you? And that takes that requirement for a disclosure away. And you can also work in ways that benefit everybody. You can provide really clear expectations. You can say, this is the task, this is the outcome, this is the time I need it by, this is, my expectation of you. All of those sorts of things that really work for everybody. You can think about that based on broad understandings of some of the challenges that neurodivergent people might face, and offer those, those accommodations to everyone.
So if we take a step back for a second and we talk about what the experience is of somebody who is neurodiverse, because by the sound of it, when we look at the language that people use, we look at this unconscious bias, I think a lot of it comes from a lack of education. And then we've got this fundamental attribution error, as though you're being lazy on purpose, you're late on purpose, and that's something that you have to fix, as opposed to taking a step back, looking at the system, self-reflecting, going, right, what can we change about the system so that everybody can work to their best? So we'll play with that in a second. What is the experience of, because you said 40% of people either don't disclose or, I think, mask what it is that they're going through, and 34% aren't employed, I think you said. What's going on in that space? Like, is that something that's becoming more talked about? Is there more education or awareness happening in the neurodiverse space?
Yeah, that's, I think it is the broad understanding of neurodiversity in the workplace is increasing. I think I've seen many more studies on things that you can do to help neurodivergent folk in the workplace. I think some of the, and some of the challenges, if we think about standard hiring practices and the way that you usually do an interview, it's face-to-face, you don't have the information in advance. So what you're doing with a standard interview is you're interviewing for someone that interviews well. You're not necessarily focusing on the requirements of the job. You're focusing on, does someone make you feel comfortable? Does someone like to have a good chat? Does someone have the ability to ad-lib about their experiences, about, does someone have the ability to not jump around while they're talking to you, or, all of these things that really are just very interview-centric. So if you think about people that might struggle with ad-libbing, or if somebody struggles or presents differently in the way that they communicate, might not provide you with the level of eye contact that makes you feel comfortable, or they might be doing something else while they're talking to you. So say fidgeting, things like that. All of those sorts of things can impact somebody's ability to create that first impression. And then people are going to, potentially hire people that make them feel comfortable or do those other things. And it's really got nothing to do with the outcome of the work that you're looking for. Things like providing interview questions in advance, giving people practical tasks to achieve, looking at transferable skills. All of these things are techniques and processes that people are putting in place more often to make accessibility within an interview, broadening that accessibility, which really helps, it helps everybody. Because I think, people say, oh, but if you provide the questions in advance, then people can go away and research the answer. It's like, well, in what aspect of a role would that not be the regular outcome? In what aspect of a role does someone come up to you and ask you a question and you're having to provide the answer directly on the spot, as opposed to, having time to think about it and go away and find an answer that works. And if you think about unemployment or underemployment, if you have people that are experiencing continual knockbacks and these sorts of things when they're trying to get into the job market, it's really discouraging, it's really disheartening. And you have people that are either unemployed or underemployed, working multiple jobs, or people are employed but they're not able to work to their best. So because they're not feeling supported and they're not, being provided with the training to move up, people aren't focusing on their skills and their strengths. They're focusing on things that might challenge them. And not seeking to bolster, help them with those challenging things so that they can really focus on what they're good at.
So for people who are already employed, potentially them masking and not having the support, not feeling included, not feeling like they belong, means that they're not going to thrive and bring their full selves to work, which potentially, if we think about them personally, there are detriments there. If we think about the benefit, there's going to be cost and productivity and happiness and health benefit. If we think about the folks who haven't been employed yet, then there's a huge detriment there to folks who have the skills, have the knowledge, are eager and willing and absolutely ready to jump into the job of their dreams. But there's a system there and there's a process there that is, I guess, blocking their path because of, like you said, interview processes and things like that, and taboo and stigma and assumptions and all that kind of blocks their entry to a lot of different jobs. What is the benefit to organizations? Because my feeling is there are a lot of people who very transactional, too hard. This is how we've always done it. If you can't do an interview, I don't like. What is the risk to an organization of excluding a huge group of people, of potential employees who are excited and really want to, I guess, engage in the workforce? What's the risk and benefits to an organization of bringing in this level of awareness and inclusivity in these practices?
There are so many benefits. If we start off with profitability and market share, there are so many studies that show that diverse groups are able to be more innovative, problem solve faster, generate new ideas that make them higher performing. In terms of market share, if you're reflecting in your workforce the community, the diversity of the community that you are serving, whether that's in it's product design, physical design, any kind of service that you are providing, if you have people on your staff that reflect society, you are getting input from the people that you're serving. So it makes sense to include people so that you are creating a product that works best for everyone. If we think about employees and employee engagement, it's recognized there are so many skills shortages out there. People are struggling to find people, and they're really missing out. If you broaden your ability to support people, you have access to a broader pool of people who want to work, who just, might need additional support in areas, and that's okay. So you're broadening your access to people to join your workforce. And if you're supporting people, if you're letting people work in the way that they work best, you're enhancing people's like retention within the role. You're not losing people because they don't feel supported. You're not constantly, having to fund the recruitment of new talent because you've got really high turnover.
Yeah.
And that's the same across, I guess, all diversity, like people wanting women into the workforce, people wanting broader cultural and ethnic diversity.
Age.
All age, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all of these things that sort of come under that broad diversity umbrella. It works the same way with neurodiversity. It's what's going to help somebody in their role to thrive. People want to work for organizations that show that this is not just a tick box exercise that you will join and you will feel belonging, not just that you're fitting in, that you're having to, you can ask for the things that you need, that you're going to be supported, you're going to be promoted, all of these sorts of things, because it's all very well to bring people in, but you need to keep them there, you need to promote them, you need to provide broader training, whether that's neurodiversity awareness training, whether it's empathy training like you do, whether it's cultural awareness training, all of those sorts of things to make everybody aware.
Yeah, absolutely.
About, how this works for people. And there is just, so many benefits.
Oh, absolutely. And it is that diversity, equity, inclusion, and a lot of people forget the B. It's the belonging piece. Otherwise, the other bits are kind of just lip service. But the other thing that then people do is you become an employer of choice because people talk well about you. They say, hey, like I tell my friends, and I've referred people to you and said, who are saying, oh, I don't know where to go and I don't know what to do and I'm feeling a bit sort of left out. I say, go talk to ASA. I even literally said to somebody last night, have you heard of Australian Spatial Analytics? Because I was talking to a lady whose son has ASD. I said, have you heard of them? She's like, no. I said, well, they're the fastest growing social enterprise in Australia. Talk to them. So you've talked about all the benefits for, I'm going to say, the muggle businesses, because really, I think there's a lot of catching up to do and there's a lot of awareness to occur. And you've sort of addressed it so beautifully in terms of productivity, in terms of how people thrive and culture and being able to bring their best self to work and that diversity of thought. And I mean, we all know we've sat in a meeting where nobody really feels psychologically safe. Nobody's overly interested. We just want to get to our lunch break. And they're like, hey, we're going to have a brainstorming session. Everybody goes, yeah, whatever, just do whatever you say. That's not where innovation lives. That's not where creativity lives. What sort of things then are ASA doing? Like, why are you the company at the top of a lot of people's lips at the moment when it comes to neurodiversity and what you're doing and why you're achieving the amazing things that you're achieving? What sort of things are ASA doing at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So if we start at the start, so really at that immediate hiring practice, we do those things like providing interview questions in advance, providing practical skills, assessments, being really clear about what the job looks like, really focusing on the fact that there are transferable skills. So you don't have to have done the work before necessarily to, that's not a predictor of whether you can do the work that we're doing. So for us, our focus is on geospatial and engineering. So we're looking at pattern recognition, sort of attention to detail, those sorts of things, which you can assess without having, done engineering work before or done mapping work before. Once people have joined us, it's things like we have ways of working that make it really clear around expectations. The way that we sort of set out emails, you might have bottom line up front, which is a summary of the email. Why am I sending this email? What's the outcome? What does it mean to you? When does it need to be done by?
Yeah.
And then, you step out the next steps. It's things like putting agendas in meetings. It's understanding how people learn best. So do you learn through a really text-heavy practical manual? Probably not. Do you learn through like someone showing you and then having a video to refer back to. Often there will be online courses, but we'll take that away and then develop a working method for the team. You know, like if we have a project where we're often bringing new people onto it, all of the tasks are really clearly defined, the problems are really clearly defined, the outcomes and the actions that you need to get there. It's very clear. We ask people how they prefer to communicate. You know, you can let people primarily communicate through Teams instead of having a meeting. You can let people catch up afterwards. Like for myself, I found it really useful being able to ask for Teams recap. So that's something that, say in this meeting, it would record us talking, it would transcribe, it would take AI notes, and then I can refer back to those when I have a meeting instead of having to split my focus between talking to you and writing down what you've said, writing down all of the important things. Yeah, technological tools for accessibility, you know, letting people know that you can have transcripts on, closed captions on, those sorts of things. Really just understanding what works best for people in the way that they're working. Do they prefer to work from home? For us, at least at the start, all of the analysts will work in the office for the first 6 months or so, because we do recognise that having that one-to-one accessibility while you're learning new things is really important. But after that time, if people want to work from home because it means that they can focus, because it's, you know, there aren't as many impacts in having to actually get into the office, all of those sorts of things, which really, again, benefit everybody. Allowing for, if we think about sensitivities, so we have quiet spaces, we have spaces where there are less light, so we have desks that you can move, we have standing desks with different types of chairs, you know, you can have noise cancelling headphones, you can have fidget toys at work, little things like knowing that if somebody's doodling in a meeting or if somebody's fidgeting in a meeting, just because they're not looking at you doesn't mean that they're not paying attention. Just because they're not being, I guess, overly vocal in a meeting doesn't mean that they're not engaged. It's saying, okay, well, what are your thoughts after that? Giving people time to process.
And I suppose that's the real definition of inclusion, isn't it? It's not, hey, tell me what you need and I'll make it. It's not sitting at the front of the bank in front of the steps in a wheelchair going, hey, excuse me, can I please have a ramp? It's creating this space and this environment that acknowledges that everybody is different and there are lots of options, and some of them you can use and some of them you don't, but you do not have to say, excuse me, could I please have, because it's naturally part of the environment. And while by the sound of it, it was designed with neurodiversity in mind, I'm listening to you talk going, oh, how lovely would that lack of ambiguity be? How lovely would that consideration be? The quiets, the quiets. I've worked in open plan and you're just itching for a quiet space, creating this environment that reduces stress as well, because stress, as we know, like workplace stress, leaders and managers creating workplace stress by having these assumptions, by acting as though people are being obstinate or as they're late on purpose and they don't care and they're not paying attention, instead of turning it around and saying, right, what can we do to support people to work in a way where they thrive? And again, every time I have one of these conversations, whether it's about the trades or whether it's about call centers, we always get to this point, we go, why isn't everybody doing this? Why isn't this normal and standard? Like, this sounds like it should not be a conversation that we're having as though it is special. I feel like organizations and workplaces should be welcoming, inclusive, not this cookie cutter, this is how we've always done it.
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the additional things that I didn't mention was that we have people success officers, and that's someone whose role is to provide additional support to the team, with recognition that, you know, even if you're providing an environment that really works well, if you're coming from really, negative working environments. You might have other things that are impacting you and your way and that you are able to show up for work, even if you're, being really supported in this environment. I sort of think about it, and I love gardening, right? So I like gardening analogies. So if you think about plants, there are all sorts of different plants, all sorts of different requirements for plants. If you have a plant, you need to know, the sunlight it needs, the temperature it needs, the nutrients it needs. If you think about what you want to do as a gardener, if you want to say, oh, I have a swamp, but I'd really like a cactus. I'd really like to grow this cactus in a swamp, right? And you have the swamp, you've got the cactus in the swamp. Cactus can kind of do the swamp, maybe, right? It's still there. And then you think, oh, it's not really working. I'll put the cactus where it needs to go. The cactus might take more time to recalibrate into the environment that works really well for it. Like you can't just expect everybody to be the same. So it's, and people are similar. You can't expect somebody to just immediately thrive in a situation if they have had negative experiences that have impacted their self-confidence and their ability to, it's easy enough to say, oh, you're masking, unmask. But a lot of people, if they haven't experienced masking, don't actually realize that it takes effort to unmask.
Yep.
And you don't know how people are going to take to that.
Oh, that's vulnerable. Yeah.
So we sort of are very aware of these sorts of things and the impact that being a neurodivergent person just day to day has had on people's lives. So our PSO is really somebody who supports that, but also, focus on things like, what are your goals? How do we get there? How do we support you with maybe financial planning? How do we support you with all of these other things that you want to do in life that aren't just your career? And then if we focus on the career side of things, we also have a transition support officer. So that's someone who specifically focuses on how do we, where do you want to go in your career? Because often it's the case that, people might join ASA, they've come from a biomedical background, they've come from a cybersecurity background, if they've studied. So it might be the case that, they're amazing at digital engineering and geospatial, but they might want to get back into other areas. So we have a transition support officer who really focuses on that career planning and, how do we support you to get where you want to go, whether that's in engineering or geospatial, whether that's, somewhere else. We recently had one of our incredible analysts go join a traineeship in cybersecurity over in Canberra for the AFP, which is really exciting. We don't do cybersecurity, but she's awesome. She's gained a whole bunch of skills, technical skills, professional skills while she's been at ASA. And she's like, I'm going to go do that. It's like, great. Amazing.
And that's very different. So that transitional employment model, as opposed to finite model of people just come and work for you forever, that's so, like we talk about staff turnover, it's a very different type of staff turnover. It's like a supported staff turnover. So we know and we want you to thrive and we want you to take what you've learned and go and take it out into the world and go and find where you best fit. Because I remember you saying when I was talking to you a little while ago, you said, look, what we do here might not be the best fit for the person that I was referring to you, but we can have a chat about what might be a good fit, what we know of, like where. And I don't think people have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important for us. Like our goal is to expand people's opportunities and career paths and really recognize the fact that there is, there's infinite options there. It's not, there are ideas that, autistic folk, they're really great at tech. They don't want to do tech. No, like this is not the thing. Like, they might be amazing at tech, but they also, people are really creative. People can, do so many other things. It's like not limiting people by assumptions about
Or
you know,
popular media as well. And we've seen Rain Man, and we've seen like autistic savants, like all of these assumptions that people have around autism. Oh, what's your special skill, and do you pick up matchstick? Like getting rid of that. And I think also getting rid of, like we talked about at the beginning, this assumption that there is autism in terms of one thing. I mean, I remember us saying, and I think we said it on the parents of kids with autism, and we've said it last time on dementia. You've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. This isn't this is, I now know everything about you because of a word.
Absolutely. And it's appreciating the way that autism or ADHD or whatever it might be shows up for people is incredibly different. You know, someone might be autistic but have, you know, great social skills, but they might really struggle with sound and texture and other things. And the fact that, you know, the impacts and the challenges might be different day to day. It can, you know, things can change and they can flex. And yeah, just asking people what works for them. And I mean, it is the case that, you know, coming back to, I guess, being in the workplace, it's estimated that it's 1 in 5 people are neurodivergent, right? So you're already working with neurodivergent folks. They just haven't said, well, they don't know. That's the same for me. Late in life diagnosed. I lived the majority of my life not realizing that I was neurodivergent. And I just thought that I just had a whole bunch of things that I really struggled with. And it's easy to focus on the struggles as opposed to focusing on the strengths. You know, you just think, oh, I could just be better if I just tried harder.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's like for me, if I look back at my university career, it's wild that I would top a subject and fail a subject. Why would somebody choose to have that difference if you could just, you know, top everything or just have a really, you know, like a B+ average? That'd be great. You know, that wasn't a choice, but people look at you and you think, oh, you can be really good, so you're obviously just not
trying hard enough.
You know, you're just being lazy, because if you can do it there, why can't you do it there? And it's like, oh, I don't know. You know, and then you get diagnosed, like, I have an interest-based nervous system. This is like fundamentally the way my brain rewards me. It's different to the way that other people's brain rewards them. You know, it's just different.
And I think it's also, if we bust assumptions for a second, it's also hard to get a diagnosis. Like, it's not as though people are born with a label. You know, like they have a barcode that goes, this one's autistic, this one's good. And it's like, even as an adult, I mean, I've got 2 kids. I mean, early on, it's just one of those things that we talk about sort of as parents, and the stress and the cost of diagnosing something like ADHD, ASD, dyslexia, it's hugely prohibitive. And then it gets even harder in the teen years and harder in the adult years. Like, is that the sort of experience that you had as well?
Yeah, 100%. I want to say lucky. I was diagnosed 10 years ago with ADHD. There wasn't the awareness and the demand. So that was relatively straightforward for me. I mean, it was administratively burdensome, and there was a really, you know, relatively high financial cost. And I'm very aware that I'm privileged in being able to do that. And I guess, like, I should say that I had no idea. It was my partner, who I'm very, you know, he's amazing. And it was my partner that said, hey, babe, I think this might be a thing for you.
Wow.
And I was like, no, absolutely not. And it took years and years and years for me to, post-diagnosis, post having access to medication that was amazing and worked, to really feel that this was true for me, that I wasn't just bad at things. But similarly with autism diagnosis, right? I've looked into that, but it's $2,500. That's just so much money. And there are some organizations like the Digital Picnic, who are providing cost of diagnoses for their staff. They're an Australian business. They're amazing. But yeah, it's recognizing that there are, you know, financial burdens, administrational burdens, I guess, cultural differences and like acceptance of neurodiversity, cultural barriers. It's really hard. Assumptions still within the medical profession about how things show up for people, especially differences between how they show up for people who are assigned male at birth and assigned female at birth. It's incredibly difficult to go through that process unless you have support and people to support you in that.
I think even like people that I've spoken to, a lot of girls go under the radar because they're better at masking, or it's missed as something else, or it's just big personality, or they're just flighty, or do you know what I mean? And
absolutely.
Yeah. Because we think autistic kid, and you think like a little
little kid little boy who doesn't really into trains, not that into communicating. Like, there are these assumptions, and that was the same for me. You know, I thought of ADHD as a hyperactive little boy who's always moving about, whereas I have the inattentive type, right? So that doesn't show up. I mean, it shows up in things like disorganization, or, you know, not focusing on things, but there are so many things that can just be assigned to a personality flaw. It makes it really hard. And still, I have so much internalized ableism about the fact that these things are legitimately harder for me than they are for other people, and that it's fundamentally different, and I shouldn't feel bad about it. I need to address it in these various different ways, but I shouldn't feel like a bad person because it's harder for me.
Or a failure.
Exactly. But it's really difficult to do that, and it's difficult when you're showing up in the world that expect people to present in a certain way. You know, they think that if you're not looking them in the eye, that they don't, you know, you're not paying attention, that they don't respect you. Like, all of these things, if you're asking a bunch of questions, you're being challenging or difficult, or all of these things that make it, you do end up putting these barriers in place to how you operate in the world. And it makes it hard.
One of the things that I talk about in empathy training, and it feels like it so fits here, is I talk about the words should and just. You should just do this. I should feel this way. I should just be able to do this. You should just be able to do this. You should just. It doesn't belong anywhere. And by replacing that with inclusion and curiosity, it means that we don't have to feel bad that, I need extra time and I don't do well with ambiguity. But you know what? When I thrive, when I am in the zone, when I'm supported, when I know that the work that I do is valued and it matters and that I have the space to do it, magic happens. And that takes bravery and vulnerability on the part of organizations to go, we want people to be their best self. We want people to feel heard, valued, visible, and safe, whether they have a label, whether they don't, whether they work a particular way. We want to create that space so that everybody can thrive, because the thing that we are doing matters.
Absolutely. And you want, if we come back to the gardening analogy, you want a beautiful and diverse garden, like the way that you want a team that complements each other's strengths and complements each other's challenges. You know, if you have someone who is incredible at coming up with a whole bunch of ideas but struggles to prioritize them, you know, those are things that you can recognize and build teams that work together in a way that works. But you can't do that without being empathetic and asking questions and paying attention and not assuming that this is how someone should work in
Yeah.
a workplace, assuming that everyone has the same sunlight needs.
Yeah.
And
If I can do it,
temperature needs.
anyone can do it.
You know, exactly. And people in managerial positions need that training. If you think about gardeners, you'll often go to someone's house and they'll have books and books and books on how to look after plants. But it's very rare that you go to a manager's house and they'd have shelves of books talking about how to best support people, because it's the case that they're good at what they do and then they get promoted.
Yeah.
And the thing that works for them and the way that they show up and the way that they've been able to be successful is often this very sort of cookie cutter mold of what a leader does and what a leader looks like. But that's, you know, there's not one way to lead. There's not one way to be successful. There's not one way to, you know, show up. And just because you have a challenge with something doesn't mean that you can't learn to do that thing in a way that works for you. It's, you provide people the opportunity to stretch and grow into those spaces where that might have been uncomfortable before.
Yeah.
That's the same for everyone. You want to see that growth. You want to see people at all levels of the organization reflecting the community that you're in.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to provide training and provide people those supported ways to grow and be promoted and all of those sorts of things.
And I guess it's also for people who are in that position to provide that, to create new organizations, to create new ways of doing things. That takes bravery. That takes looking at your own insecurities. That takes looking at your own leadership style and looking at, well, why do I white knuckle onto the power that I have and why don't I share it and all those sorts of things. But it also takes really truly understanding that, yes, it is a cost, but it is a cost with benefits. It is a cost that pays itself back. It's a cost that reduces risk. It's a cost that improves your employer of choice status. It improves your reputation. It improves your creativity, your innovation, your standing. There is no downside to this. So what sort of advice would you give to, let's say, somebody who's looking for a job who might be, can we say neurospicy? I've seen neurospicy. What is with the word neurospicy? What's your advice for somebody? I love that term, but I can't.
No, 100%. So neurospicy, I don't use the term neurospicy or neurosparkly.
Sparkly.
That's,
I like
sparkly. Just that's the me thing. But I think it comes from the fact that, you know, like the idea that you are divergent, and this, like the term divergent, or, you know, if we think about other like historical ways in which people have described as like deviant, or, you know, it's like this negative term, the assumption that what is typical is correct.
Gotcha.
What is divergent is wrong. So if you come across neurospicy, it's like my understanding is it's people just creating labels that work for them, that make them feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
As opposed to
it feels less medical.
Divergent. Yeah.
Like I guess it comes back into that medical versus social language around it as well.
Yeah, advice for, I think it's really important to recognize that you as an individual who are different and unique, that is inherently a strength. You know, the fact that you have struggled to, you know, maybe get into the workforce, it's not a reflection on you as a person, because you have inherent value and inherent things that you can bring to any workplace. It's that, things are fundamentally not designed to, you know, they're not designed in a way that works best for you. So I'd say reach out and sort of look for communities that are focusing on neurodivergent folks. So there are lots of internships for people with disabilities, traineeships that focus on neurodivergent people, lots of different ways to really focus on your inherent unique strengths, and then also be able to more confidently bring that to a workplace, to be able to say, not necessarily that, I'm autistic and thus I struggle with these things,
Yeah.
but to say, these are the things I really excel at, and to allow me to excel at these things. These are some of the things that help me do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really great if I have a really clear structure, if I can, this is all of these things that I guess sort of knowing yourself. And it is hard if you haven't experienced a workplace before to understand what's going to work best for you. So it can be a bit hit and miss, but again, coming back to the community, so you can ask other people, how they've found success, how they've found, and I think it's also really important to remember that there's this idea that, if you're not participating in the workforce, that you are, that's like a reflection on you. Like, certainly it is true that if you are struggling to access the workforce, that you're fundamentally limited in your ability to fund the things that you want to do and, to progress in that way. But it's not, just because these are the struggles that you've had doesn't mean that it's a reflection of you as a person. But if it's something that you want to do, it's something that you can do, and that hopefully more and more employers are broadening their knowledge and horizons and ability to create a more diverse and diverse workforce.
I think as well, I mean, I talked to Dr. Gary Allen from enabled.vip, and there's lots more opportunities in entrepreneurship. There's lots more opportunities in that self-employment space. If being in a particular career doesn't suit you, there are so many opportunities now. Like you said, it's talking to communities, it's seeing what's out there, it's being able to say, hey, I'm looking for this and I'm good at this, and this is the thing that lights my fire and makes my eyes light up. Like those conversations, not this is what I'm not good at.
Focusing on strengths is so important.
What advice do you have? Because I heard ASA have training now.
We do. So we have neurodiversity awareness training. So we have, and this is something that we developed because when we have engagements where team members are moving from ASA to a client, that's training that we developed to support our clients' team, to support our analysts, as well as their workforce more broadly. And that's been really successful. And so we've opened that up to anyone really who's interested in learning more about neurodiversity in the workforce. And I guess our focus on that training is it's informed by having a team of over 120 neurodivergent staff members. So it's built from that experience. So it's providing broad awareness and then really focusing on sort of workshops where you're going through specific examples of,
cool.
How to support people, how to focus on strengths, how to support people with challenges that they might face, how to, best ask those questions about how do you communicate, all of those sorts of things, which is, it's really exciting for us to be able to expand that more broadly. And we've had a lot of interest, which has, been really great. And it's, very similar to what you do in your space with empathy training, because it is important to go out and seek people with experience and to learn and, pass that through all the way through the organization in order to support people.
Yeah, such a wonderful resource. And I think the whole way through this discussion, you've really shared ways that employers not only benefit, so we've kind of, that's not even a question, but the sorts of things that they can do, and whether it's their employment practices or their hiring practices or their interview practices or the way that they structure work or the way that they self-reflect, look at their unconscious biases, look at the history of how they've done things, and really get brave and interested and curious about how to do things differently. This training then really sets a nice, I guess, first step. And that I think is super important, because I think people are afraid of doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing. So being able to set that. The one thing that I would love to add, and that we talk about in empathy training, is to get rid of, just in general conversation, using terms like ASD, OCD, schizo, psycho as throwaway insults, or, oh my God, my OCD is playing up. I really want to see that disappear out of our language, because it really disrespects and diminishes the experience of somebody with obsessive compulsive disorder or somebody with schizophrenia, because we're kind of using it as a punchline or an insult. And I would love, just as a first awareness piece, get rid of that in your organization by being able to call people out on it. Oh my God, my ADHD is flaring. No, that's not no.
Because you're only associating it with negative terms, right? You're not saying, oh, I was able to get 8 hours work done in 2 hours. My hyperfocus is really flaring up. It's not,
no.
It's not something that you do. Yeah, I agree. And it's also another big thing is trusting people to share their experience and being able to hear that.
Yeah.
No, like, not if someone says, oh, I'm autistic, not saying, oh, you don't seem autistic. Or, oh, we're all a little bit autistic. We're all a little bit on the spectrum.
Yeah.
I had a great joke. It's like, if everyone was on the spectrum, the trains would run on time. It's like, this is not like, again, stereotypes, but it's, you have to trust people's experiences, and when they share things with you, listen and not be like, that doesn't fit with my idea of this.
And get curious and get rid of any fear that you have or any bias that you have. You've met one person with autism, you've met one person with ADHD. Your assumptions, your stigma, your biases don't count.
And it's also like recognizing that in order to provide support, as you say, you don't need to know somebody's diagnosis, because reflecting that diagnosis, achieving the piece of paper is incredibly difficult and incredibly expensive and challenging. And just, not having to say, I'm going to only support, provide whatever accommodation if you can show me that this is,
prove to me you need support.
It's coming back to how do we support everybody and all of those sorts of things.
It's getting rid of this narrow mindset that I need to invite you to the table. It's no, we need people in leadership who are neurodiverse. We need people to belong and not fit in. We need to understand that it's not just about you thriving and flourishing, it's we all thrive and flourish. And the business thrives and flourishes when we have that inclusion and that sense of belonging and safety, where everybody feels heard, valued, visible, and safe. Emma, if people want to reach out and find you, where are they going to find you?
So you can Google Australian Spatial Analytics, or you can head over to our website, which is asanalytics.com.au. We're also on LinkedIn as well. If you'd like to email me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn. Always happy to, have a chat. Really interested in broadening everybody's understanding and experiences to support everyone.
Thank you so much for today. Really, really important conversation. And I know I have a bunch of people who are waiting on this conversation to really broaden their understanding of what neurodiversity in the workplace means. Emma, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Wonderful to be here. Really appreciate it.